They come for the architecture, but stay for the people. This is St. Paul's.
There's something beyond the architecture, that there's something to St. Paul's beyond the building. The building is not the primary be-all and end-all of St. Paul's. That it's the people and what we do here that gets people, may not get them in the door the first time, but it gets them to stay and commit themselves.
Most drive past one or two other Episcopal churches to come here. This is St. Paul's.
We moved here and we're looking for a congregation that preserved tradition and had a worship style that recognized that history and tradition of the Christian church, but that it was also welcoming to younger folks. And after visiting a variety of churches in Salt Lake, St. Paul's was a facility and sanctuary that really combined all of those things for us.
It's been that way for nearly 140 years. St. Paul's became a part of Utah in 1879 with this original chapel. It was a fixture of Main Street in downtown Salt Lake City. It was a bold step. The presence of a new church in the heart of a town founded as a Mormon enclave a little over 30 years before, and a church just a few blocks from the new Cathedral Church of St. Mark's. St. Paul's prospered, and less than 40 years later, the church had outgrown its building and moved to the fringe of town, about 9 blocks away.
At the time this church was built, we moved here in 1917, and then with this addition in 1927, this was still in the suburbs of Salt Lake at the time, and so the folks who came here were more suburbanite rather than the urban folks who lived in the area on the 4 South Street.
It operated out of what is now the parish hall, with a second-story chapel. But the dynamic church always planned something bigger. A big contest was held for designs. Fortunately, this design did not win. And a spectacular nave was planned. Salt Lake City watched as the edge of town got a new landmark. And in 1927, a spectacular nave of stone was completed. Yes, another bold statement from the people of St. Paul's. The event was certainly noted. Bishop Arthur Moulton led a couple hundred masons up the street to lay the cornerstone, while a couple hundred more watched.
This particular building, this edition, 1927 edition, again is so church-like and also has all of those elements of the Tudor and English architecture, the Old English churches from the 1500s.
The church was designed to reflect the glory of God and the tradition of Gothic spaces.
When it's fresh snow and it's on these beautiful trees and bushes, and especially at night, like if, for instance, you were lucky enough to have it snow while we're in church on Christmas Eve and you come out into it, it's like going to winter fairyland. It's wonderful, and I don't know how else to say. It is just a beautiful setting.
It's also an intimate setting where one doesn't get lost. The Depression hit just as the church was finished. Even in the excitement of the new place, we saw the same heritage of stewardship we see today. The vestry debated long into the night if the church could afford towels for the men's room. The ministry was always to come first. It still does. St. Paul's was designed to be a place to reflect as you observe the exterior, and in the interior, it is a place to become quiet and calm as you walk towards the nave. A place where generations before you have also reflected on their lives. And even a young presidential candidate once worshipped here in sacred reflection. The nave offers opportunity to think about those who came before us, in peace, and as a memorial to those lost in the Great War. The worship space was enhanced by the spectacular Te Deum window. Almost 70 years later, that day it was installed is remembered like it was yesterday.
When I was little, maybe sometime about 9, 10 years old, It had always been just plain glass in most of the windows, or a lot of them, but I'd seen a few change. But one Sunday, I came to church, and it was like I had just seen The Wizard of Oz, or because it was all this gorgeous, gorgeous color. I don't know how they did it. They must have put it together somehow and then put it in, but it was just like going from blah to gorgeous. It was so pretty, all that beautiful color. And now, sitting in the choir, which is where I sit most of the time, especially in an evening service, and the light coming through that window is phenomenal. It's absolutely gorgeous.
But again, the church was not only about the architecture. It was about the people, right from the very start. And the people brought a life to this stately building. For the kids, there was the Girls' Friendly Society, the youth choir, scouts, a basketball team, and acolytes. By the 1950s, St. Paul's paraded through town, almost running out of room to list activities. But this was the old days of hats, gloves, and the days that only men ran the church government.
The church has changed, society's changing. I think the basketball era of the 50s and 60s was terrific, and now I think what we're trying to do is provide that same sense of belonging to the church and what we do as a community in the church for the young folks that worked successfully in the 1950s and 1960s. We can't do the same thing because basketball and church leagues aren't the same as they were, but bringing those children that same sense of love that they had, and when they look back next generation, the following generation, knowing that they were here and they did those same sort of things when they were little that their children will be doing. I think that's that sort of notion of history and the connection that we've gone from one generation to the next here.
This is where I'm going.
Which leads us to today. We've already seen the children, a sign of life in a church. And one of the reasons we have a well-known preschool in the building. And excited kids on Sunday. Here they are on a treasure hunt through the historic hallways.
I love to come to the gatherings and see the kids, and they run through the church. They play, they have fun, they're laughing and wonderful. And I love kids, and I love to watch how they interact. I was a teacher for 25 years, and I love to watch kids and see how they are, and I like to interact with them if I can. Sometimes they look, think, oh, that's an old lady probably, but I don't care.
Everyone is very special.
And yet, it's not all fun and games. It is a relevant lesson in the new reality of urban life. The older youth routinely gather food to share at the food bank. Sure, they eat their share of pizza and do what teens do, but they come here to be served by the Lord and to serve the Lord.
We provide the safe space for the youth to participate and to come and have an authentic experience. And whether they decide to connect with religion or with God, they know that they're welcome, and they know that they're safe, and they know that they're valued for their gifts that they bring, no matter what that may be.
They will gather food that will be dispensed from the pantry. The pantry is in a new part of the campus, where it can be given out in pleasant surroundings and with dignity. It is also one of the very few places people can get food from a food bank that is open on Saturdays. Outreach is vital because these are our fellow Christians.
I have come from, a family where this is our place, not because it's always comfortable, but this is where we belong.
And it's not just serving others. It is serving those within the congregation. This is a community, and a community is more than coffee hour.
We just found a home at St. Paul's. We felt the very spiritual worship, the music, the groups, the family. Shortly after we started coming to St. Paul's, I had a very difficult family tragedy. We lost 3 members of our family in a horrible fire. And I was welcomed by all the members of St. Paul's, literally surrounded and held up in my moment of grief. And that kept me here more than anything. They were family to me at a time when I had lost family. And that was such a very important part of being here at St. Paul's.
The faces, families, and people. They come from all over the valley, and they come from different cultures and backgrounds.
There were so many diverse people in the way of families. There were small families, large families. There were families that didn't look like the typical Utah family. People of the LGBT families that I find a very joyful, wonderful community to be part of in the way that we all come together to worship, to have communion, to have fun, to do all types of community.
Often people will say they appreciate diversity, but then they don't say how they appreciate diversity. Here they do. The senior high youth director remembers being asked to see the rector.
He said, Nate, we have a youth ministry position that's open, it's unpaid, it's volunteer, but we really think it would be something that we'd like you to consider. And my first reaction was, well, Father Eamon, you know that I'm gay, right? And he said, well, yeah, what does that have to do with anything? And I said, well, I just don't want any problems, if there's any youth and parents might have an issue with it. And he said, Nate, look, you're welcome here. And if anybody has a problem with you, they've got a problem with me. And it was really just this, I've never been affirmed that way.
It's a community where some know their ministry from the start, and others learn it in places where they never suspected the Lord would take them.
What I get to learn from the kids, I'm still learning and walking on my journey with God, and it's an honor to be able to walk side by side with them.
Yes, it is what goes on within the beautiful walls that is the treasure of St. Paul's.
Well, it's a part of everyday life for me. The fellowship that it offers and the beauty of the liturgy. And of course, for me, it's the music that's the most important part.
The sparrow has found her house.
There is one ministry that has become a hallmark of St. Paul's. It is the ministry of music.
On the pilgrim's way.
At the heart of the music program, there is a volunteer choir that fills the nave with the glory of God.
We do not hold auditions. We just work with what we have, and we do the very best with whoever shows up.
Like pretty much everything at St. Paul's, it is open to all. And like pretty much everything at St. Paul's, it is done to enhance the faith for all, no matter how or why people are here.
We work very, very hard on consonants and vowels and breathing and all the things that make a music musical.
The music just washes through me. And sometimes I'll come to a part of a hymn or an anthem that is so beautiful that I almost cannot quite get the words out because the emotion is so great.
It is a program that also starts with the children. The choir director starts each Sunday with the youth prior to church. It's also where programs overlap to reinforce the ministry. The Sunday school supervisor knows his ministry is strengthened by their music. And the choir director knows another generation is being inspired in the nearly 140-year-old church.
I think it's very important. Music helps the kids to feel connected. It helps them learn how to worship without it being tedious. It's just fun.
So we see that St. Paul's is a church connected to the heritage of its history and with the ministry of its present.
Hear the word of the Lord.
But it's also a church that sees the need to live in the future. To be open to the expanding mysteries of faith is always part of the church, and change is prayerfully embraced.
So we have a real pride in this church and our history here as a church family, and so I see us as just moving in the same course but with new things.
St. Paul's is really a great place that is poised for the future to become bigger than we already are, not in terms of physical size, but in terms of what we do and how we do it. Meaning that as we've struggled with growth and change, there's areas that I think our congregation is ready to look at and work on. We've struggled with the range of things such as incorporating youth and growing a more robust youth program, to the other end of the age spectrum, to making sure that we continue to honor and respect elders of the congregation who've been here for a long time.
Change is part of every ministry here, and each has a ministry at St. Paul's, and each takes his or her place in the tradition of service, whether it is outreach, fellowship, the youth, being a lay weeder in the garden, preparing food, preparing the service, or preparing yourself in the tradition of serving the glory of God. It is all St. Paul's.
We're not a group of people who are static. We all don't believe the same way. We are still willing to engage in conversation and have differences of opinion, but we keep coming back.
I can't imagine going to another church.